Today, we're diving into Texas, where some of the most intense, modern political battles are being fought, but with a rule book that's nearly 150 years old. It's a story all about deep divisions, stalled progress, and the foundational laws that are kind of at the heart of it all. So, to get our heads around this, let's go back to 2017 and the 85th Texas legislature. Lawmakers met for 140 days, right? But that session became famous not really for what it did, but for what it failed to do. It's a perfect window into the forces that really define Texas politics. So what exactly went wrong? Well, it wasn't just your standard partisan squabble. The session was really defined by this fundamental split between the two chambers of the legislature itself. We're talking House versus Senate, a conflict that brought progress on some really big issues to a grinding halt. Yeah, the session was just marked by this intense disagreement between the House, which was led by Speaker Joe Straus, and the Senate under Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. See, in Texas, those two roles are incredibly powerful, and they create these rival centers of authority inside the legislature. And that constant friction meant that a lot of the state's most pressing challenges were just, well, left unresolved. And this comparison just lays the divide out so clearly. On one hand, lawmakers passed several deeply partisan, socially conservative bills, but on the other, these major priorities that affect every single Texan, like school funding and property tax reform, they just stalled because the two sides couldn't find any common ground. To really get why this kind of gridlock is so common, we have to look beyond the political drama of just one session. We need to dig a little deeper and look at the actual rulebook that governs everybody in Austin. And that brings us to the Texas rulebook itself, the state constitution. You gotta understand, this thing was first adopted way back in 1876, and it isn't just some historical document collecting dust. It's an active participant, and honestly, often an obstacle in every political fight today. Think about the timing. It was written in the shadow of the Civil War and Reconstruction, so it was designed with one main goal: to strictly, and I mean strictly, limit the power of the state government. And that one core principle has massive implications for how Texas is run today. So, this leads us to the core principle of separation of powers. The Constitution intentionally sets up these different centers of authority that are designed to check each other. That political clash we saw in 2017 between the powerful House Speaker and the equally powerful Lieutenant Governor, that's a perfect example. It's two legislative leaders using their constitutionally defined roles to block the other's agenda. It's baked into the system. And get this, the Texas Constitution is just incredibly specific. It's one of the longest in the country, and that's because it includes really detailed stuff like this: a lien for mechanics. This tells you there was this deep-seated historical desire to leave as little as possible up to interpretation by politicians or judges. Okay, so how does this actually play out today? Let's make it really concrete. We'll look at one of the most contentious debates in the whole state, the fight over what millions of Texas kids learn in public school. Right, the fight over education. This is where the State Board of Education basically becomes a political battleground, where these competing views on history, religion, and American identity all collide, and it directly influences the next generation of Texans. See, the board isn't made up of academics. It's made up of 15 elected officials from all over the state. And this partisan makeup means that political and ideological debates are just baked directly into the process of setting curriculum standards for millions of students. So in one recent curriculum debate, critics were just sounding the alarm. They argued that the proposed changes were basically trying to rewrite history from a very specific political viewpoint. For instance, by minimizing the role of figures like Thomas Jefferson on the separation of church and state, or by casting doubt on the civil rights movement. But proponents of the changes, they saw it completely differently. They argued they were just correcting what they saw as a long-standing liberal bias in public education. They believed they were restoring a focus on the religious and constitutional principles that they see as essential to America's founding. Which, raises the huge question. With divisions this deep, how do these decision-makers even get into power? They aren't appointed. They're chosen by voters. And that process, well, that's the engine of the entire political system. And that choice happens at the ballot box. Elections are the fundamental way we connect the will of the people to what the government actually does, shaping everything from local school boards all the way up to the state legislature. Let's look at a concrete example right here. This table shows the results from a congressional race in Texas back in 2014. You can see the candidates, their parties, and the exact number of votes each one got. I mean, this is the raw data of democracy in action. But those numbers, they tell a story. This district, like a lot of them in Texas, has a pretty clear partisan majority. The political identity of a district heavily influences the type of representative it sends to Austin or Washington, which in turn fuels the very debates we see on everything from taxes to textbooks. So, okay, we've seen a deadlocked legislature, a 150-year-old constitution, and a polarized electorate that puts these officials in power. Now let's connect the dots and talk about why this whole intricate system matters to every single Texan. Here's the key takeaway. There is a direct, unbroken line that runs from your vote through the halls of the Capitol with all its old-school rules and ends with the policies that impact your everyday life, the quality of your local schools, the safety of your neighborhoods, and the size of your tax bill. Ultimately, the gridlock and these intense fights we see aren't random. They're the predictable outcome of a 21st century society with all its diversity and division trying to govern itself using a structure that was designed for a radically different world. And that leaves us with a final, really critical question. When the system is designed to make action difficult and the political will to compromise is gone, who pays the price for the problems that go unsolved? That's something for all of us to think about.